Joe Harris from the Undisputed Truth. Welcome to A
Yes,
Breath
it
of
is.
Fresh Air. How great to
Yes.
talk with you.
Great talking to you too.
You're a legend. You've been around so long and seen so many things. You've just been there forever, haven't you?
Yes, I'm still trying to hold on.
How long has it been that you've been with Undisputed Truth?
From the conception since 1970.
Wow, that's quite a while, isn't it?
Right,
And
1970.
you've been the main singer with Undisputed Truth the whole time.
Yes, I have.
Tell me a bit about the story of how you got started and the journey.
Wow. Well, I got started back in 1954. 1954, I was living here in Detroit, and my mom took me, and along with a few other folks, we went to not a talent show, but the rock and roll show in the neighborhood at the theater. And it happened at that night. And I had never been to one before. I was about 8 or 9. And that night on that show, headlining that show, was a guy called Lil Willie John. And when they came on stage, the band and everything, I mean, it was so dynamic. I knew right then what I wanted to do forever. And the next year, I entered junior high school, and that summer I performed in a recreational talent show for a radio station here called WCHB, and that was the first one. And we had a contest that lasted the whole summer, and at the end, the top 3 people that came out of that contest were Willie Tyler and Lester. They were 3rd. The Spinners were 2nd, and I was with a group called Little Joe and the Moroccos, and we won that first talent contest.
Amazing.
And that was the beginning.
Right.
And after that, my mom said school was my choice, so I went to school. And went to high school, no more music until I got out of high school. But in high school, I went 4 years of high school with Mary Wilson of the Supremes. And for the first hour, for 4 years, Mary and I were in an ensemble, a musical ensemble class that neither one of us never missed a day for 4 years. When we graduated, she got a female music award. I got the male music award.
Wow.
And that next year, we graduated in 62, 63, Mary Wilson was huge. 64, 65, my turn came. I was with a group called the Peps. And I worked with the Peps through 67, 66, 67. And also, at that time, I was working with a group called the Ohio Untouchables, who eventually became the Ohio Players.
Right.
Now, the Ohio Players, the Ohio Players became a group after recording their first record for the Peps. With the first record they recorded was with the Peps, and that same year they were introduced to a guy here with a record label named Armin Palladium, had Westbound Records, and then they wanted me to be a part of that group, but I was stuck with the Peps. So,
which was the song they recorded?
Later on, after I left the Peps, I joined the Ohio Players.
Right. And Joe,
we worked a year, and that year we recorded the very, very first album. And I got fired because I didn't sign the contract. But I was, I was a journeyman, and I didn't like the contract, and the rest of those guys were musicians. And they fired me in 1970. The end of 70, I was working with Harvey Fuqua in Louisville, Kentucky, and I got with a group called the Nightlighters. So I traveled to Toronto, upstate New York, and came back to Detroit 10 days in Detroit with this group called the Nightlighters. And in the audience, in the 20 grand where we were performing, was Norman Whitfield and Clay McMurray from Motown. And Norman, we've been seeing each other while I've been in there quite a few times. We had been seeing each other, but he, excuse me? Okay, I'm doing a Zoom. So, excuse me.
Not at all.
So I'm in a rehearsal hall.
I'm sorry.
So I'm gonna call myself being in a quiet room, but I'm in a rehearsal hall. So that's good. But anyway, after I left the Ohio Players, I joined the group Nightlighters, and we were performing in Detroit. Norman came and caught the show. And at the last day of that show, Clay McMurray called me and said that Norman wanted me to come by Motown and have a talk with him. So I did. When I got there, Norman made a proposition with me and said that he had two young ladies that he had been working with in the studio, and they were doing background stuff on Motown, and he wanted to put a group together. So, well, and just to clear up a lot of things, we weren't put together to be a group to practice things for the Temptations. We were put together because at that time, Norman was going through a thing at Motown where folks say, well, Norman Whitfield only got old because all the people that he produced, Smokey had already got hits on him. That kind of bothered him. So he said, I'm going to put a group together with some people that don't nobody know. And he did. And the rest of that was history.
So you became
that was the beginning. Wow. Since then, I Grammy, Emmy, Academy Award nomination, 3 times in the Rhythm and Blues Hall of Fame. I say all those things because when I first started, my mom didn't want me to do none of this.
I bet she didn't.
And, so when I started, especially when I got with Motown, she was in a world of her own, and we just passed Mother's Day, so we talk about it every year. How you doing? I'm good. And I'm still rolling. I'm still trying to put some stuff together with the group that I have today.
So, Joe,
and one of the original members, only two Motown acts, 3 Motown acts, 1 Motown act with the lead singer, 3 Motown acts with more than one of the original people in it. That's the Jackson 5, the Commodores, the Undisputed Truth.
That's it.
That's it.
Wow.
Nobody else is left.
Wow.
Everybody else is like Gladys Knight's a single, Diana Ross single, Smokey single, well, Marvin's gone, and that's it.
Yeah. Joe, what was it like as part of Motown and with Norman Whitfield? How would you describe those days?
Well, let me say this like this, because at one time I was Mr. Gordy had confronted me about writing the story after Norman Whitfield left us. He said that you need to write your story before somebody writes you in it. And he said, because what you did when you left Motown, was very exceptional. I mean, we did a lot of movies over there. I put together Rolls Royce. I put together the group Stargard. They were, besides Undisputed Truth, they were the only other groups that got gold and platinum. But we had some other groups over there that were pretty good. They were up and coming. And then the music changed again. So that kind of knocked a lot of those independent record companies off the ground.
Yeah, right.
And, but my days in Motown, wow, have mercy. I think I would have to say that was just a real faith of God, because I had been around with a lot of different record companies and recorded for a lot of other folks, Willie Mitchell, Don Davis. I mean, it's just so many other folks. In Motown, Norman Whitfield was the only producer that, well, he had rings over anybody that he allowed to produce us, and that was the only other producer that we had over there was Clay McMurray.
Right.
And
they must have been really.
Other than that, we never had anything in the can, so I never had any of the bitterness that a lot of the other artists had when they got hit records that they had to end up using that money to pay for songs that they had previously recorded that were never released. And that took away a lot of their royalties. But other than that, I mean, it was such an honor to be in a situation where everybody was professional. You know, I mean, everybody, you know, when you were at Motown, you felt like you had a reason to be who you were, and you had a status, so to speak, to live up to because of a lot of the people that were there previously. You know, so my Motown years, I think, were some of the best for a lot of reasons, because I got to work with a lot of folks that I may have never worked with, like the Jackson 5, Marvin Gaye. I mean, I had did shows with Marvin Gaye, but when we got our first Grammy, well, when we got our only Grammy, Marvin
What was the
sitting
Grammy
at the
for?
table when he got his. So best new group.
Okay.
Best new mixed group. And that Grammy, a lot of folks say, well, I don't look through the Grammy and things, but you see, a lot of folks don't know, before the Grammys became an entity of its own, the Grammys was a pass along with a lot of other groups like NARAS. You know, when NARAS would have their promotion and things, they would give away the Grammy Award. And then Grammys after that became an award of its own. They wasn't a pass along off to somebody else. So
I see.
We got one like a lot of folks. I've never seen you anything in the Grammys, but you got to go to NARAS. And that was during that time.
So, Joe, how would you describe the Undisputed Truth? A lot of people thought that they were kind of the copy group of the Temptations, because, of course, you kind of did similar things.
Well, I mean, no. And the only reason I would think that would say that was only because we had the same producer. Norman Whitfield, I mean, we sang on Edwin Starr's War, Stop the War. We sang on, the girls did on Ain't No Mountain High Enough with Diana Ross. They sang on Signed, Sealed, Delivered with Stevie. Still Waters with the Four Tops and a couple other songs, and quite a few other folks. I would describe the Undisputed Truth when we were casting ourselves at that particular time. I'd say that we cast ourselves as a lean towards Sly and the Family Stone and the Fifth Dimension.
Okay,
so we tried to cross those lines between those two groups, funky, but with a message, and with the Norman Whit, and the rest of it was whatever Norman did. Because if you pay attention to a lot of the things and some of the albums and concepts that we did, most of those ideas were Norman Whitfield's. Had nothing to do with the Temptations. The only thing that happened from the beginning was when we were recording and we were doing an album, Norman said that if you heard anything that I've done on anybody else that you think you might want to do, let me know. So, I mean, and at that time, when I first started riding with Norman and working on the concept, he had just finished that album where the Temptations did their version of Smiling Faces. And at that time, Eddie Kendricks was a very good friend of mine. And I liked the song. I was thinking like, oh yeah, it might be a cover. And Norman looked at me and said, Smiling Faces, you like that, huh? I said, yeah, I kind of like that. And then when we got ready to record it, I didn't know that he had already cut the track. So we went in the studio to record it, and I was singing it like Eddie Kendricks. Yeah, excuse me. Huh? No, I just got a shot, and I can't go. Just tell him I'm quarantining. Okay. Yeah, excuse me.
It's okay. It's okay. That's all cool. Don't worry. Don't worry. So, Smiling Faces.
And Smiling Faces. So, when I heard the music to my version of Smiling Faces, it was so different than the Temps. The only thing that I could do was just go listen to Eddie. And Norman told me, don't listen to Eddie. I listened to Eddie, and that was my first check mark. Norman, he said, "How did you think you were gonna come in here and try to sing that?" And I recorded Eddie. I was like, I don't know. So what he did was, it took me 3.5 hours to get the first two words right. Smiling faces. Took a long time.
You're kidding.
Because I'm listening to Eddie Kendricks. So when he told me, he said, wait a minute, this was take maybe 3:20. He said, "Joe, give me some Jerry Butler." I was like, "Oh, okay." Boom. I was right on it. Smiling. Boom. He said, "That's it." And then what he did was he made me sing the song from the last verse to the first, from the back to the front, so I wouldn't have that flow that Eddie did, but Jerry Butler. I was sweating bullets.
I bet.
You know, and this particular date that we recorded this, he had just got word that he had won producer, the writing producer of the year, beating up Burt Bacharach.
Uh-huh.
So, I mean, he had a great day that day, and I had a reprieve that day because he had a lot of things that he was happy about. But I thought about that forever. I was like, you know what? You know, when you go in the studio, you got to go in the studio thinking about being creative over here. You can't go in the studio just trying to. A lot of folks re-recorded a lot of those songs, and they did them because they may have needed one song to finish an album, and they went and did it very quickly. But when you hear folks that really got some work into the particular song, if you're familiar with it, from anybody at Motown, especially if it was something that the Jackson 5 did, they worked on it. You know,
Right.
they didn't just mimic or make a copy of, they tried to make their own version of it.
Right.
And then that's what we had to do with a lot of the things that we did, that the Temps had did before us. A lot of those songs that the Temps did after we got there, you know, Norman would, I'm sitting with him every day, so I get the first shot at it. But when he take those songs to Dennis, I was like, okay. Dennis, that was just this. I said that's the top of the food chain. So I mean, every song that Dennis did that I had did prior, just because I was with Norman while he was writing. Wow, I felt like that I was part of that process because Dennis didn't have to go through what I had to go through. I had to come up with something without hearing what it was going to be.
Right.
It was there in Norman Whitfield. If you're listening to him saying, you were like, "Oh Lord, have mercy."
So
I know what he means, but his voice, he wasn't a singer.
Right. So you're talking about songs.
But he knew how to interpret. He would take all those licks and lines and the way deliveries that David Ruffin would do, and then he could tell you what he wanted to do, and you get it.
Right. So you're talking about
he could do that. I mean, he was that good. I was like, wow.
So you're talking about songs
Norman passed, he recorded a whole album on himself using a Curtis Mayfield vocal delivery that he and I used to work with when we were working on a lot of songs. Because I used to follow Curtis Mayfield a lot. And Norman learned how to do those Curtis Mayfield deliveries, with his voice, because he just had to whisper them. And he can tell his story like that. And wow. But my Motown years, I think those were the years where I really learned the craft. I had already perfected just live performance because, I mean, that was what I did with the Peps and what opened the door for everything that I was introduced to as Undisputed Truth, or even with Ohio Players. The Peps was, and the irony of all of that was, I signed with, when I got out of high school, the same year Mary Wilson got out of high school, she was already with Motown. I signed with Berry Gordy's first wife. You know, it just happened that way. I met one of the guys that was already over there. And over at Thelma Records was Don Davis, Richard Street, and The Distance. And Richard Street ended up leaving from over there. Norman Whitfield had just left and went over to Motown. Well, he had went up a couple of years before, but he was going back and forth.
Uh-huh.
He had a hit with what's that first hit? on Marvin Gaye. After he had his first hit on Marvin Gaye, Norman Whitfield, he took off. You know, so then he was not at Thelma's anymore. So I was over there, and when I was over there at Thelma's, Richard Street left and went over to Motown while I was at Thelma's. But Richard Street was the original member of the Peps. He was the one that came up with the name for the group, the Peps. So, you know, a lot of history.
Joe, yeah, a lot of history. Could write a whole book on this. Joe, which was your favorite Undisputed Truth song?
My favorite? Wow.
Which did you like to sing?
Did I like to sing?
Yeah.
Smiling Faces. Smiling Faces. Smiling Faces and Papa. Well, Papa Was a Rolling Stone was written by my dad, by the way.
Papa Was a Rolling Stone was written by your dad?
Written for my dad.
Written
about
for your
my
dad. Really?
Yes, I did that before they did. And
why was it written for him? Why was it written for him?
It was so. Norman asked me when we were on tour with the Jackson 5, and we were coming back to Detroit to do a show in Detroit for a DJ here. My dad, who I had never known or never met, called me and told me that I had siblings in Detroit, and would I care to meet them? And I said, of course I would. I would love to. You know, of course, I still had no relationship. I didn't know my dad. And when I talked to Norman about it, I said, you know, my dad called me. He said, your dad? I said, well, he called me and told me that I had some siblings. And Norman was with us when we came to the date there in Detroit. And he saw my sisters and brothers. And he said, 7, you got 8 sisters and brothers? And I was like, man, I didn't know, you know. And after I met my sisters and brothers, I learned a lot about my dad. Still, I never met him, but I think maybe he changed his mind, because after that, Norman asked me about my life with my dad, and I told him my mom never mentioned his name. In fact, when I was going to junior high school, they used to ask me, well, put your dad's name down on this piece of paper. I told my mom, she said, put my name down. So I put my mom's name down there. So she was my mom and my dad.
Wow.
And
so who wrote the song?
After,
Who wrote the song?
Norman Whitfield. Barrett Strong and Norman Whitfield.
Right. And it was huge. It was huge for huge for the Temps. It was huge.
Temps.
Yeah.
When the Temps put it out, we already had it in the charts. I mean, we were climbing the charts, but we had so much momentum after Smiling Faces that, I mean, we could have put out 2 more records, and just the momentum from Smiling Faces was carrying that record. Because after the Temps put that out, we put out another song called Law of the Land, which did very good for us. You know, and then the Temps did it. See, so we were going back and forth.
Did you get upset about that? Did you get upset about that? Did you get upset about that? Did you get upset about that?
Say that again.
Did you get upset?
What's good about it?
No. Did you get upset?
No. See, first of all, the Temps were always a favorite of mine, and I was a team player. And at Motown at that time, a lot of folks were covering. I mean, we covered what's going on before Marvin got all the stuff on the album. When that song was released, and they got stuck because they didn't have enough records to sell, Barry didn't believe in that track. And so I guess they produced from the pressing plant maybe a couple of 100,000 copies of that record, and that record was asking for 1 million copies in a week, and they didn't have them. But we had the original track at Motown, and Norman was asking that same question. Anything you heard you want to do? I said, I sure like to do What's Going On. And the next thing I know, we were in the studio doing a version of What's Going On.
Really?
And
amazing.
Yeah.
Who knew?
An album cover.
That's incredible. I never knew that about the Undisputed Truth at all. And of course, today, Joe, you're running your own Undisputed Truth, aren't you? They're very much
Yes, and
alive
I
and
got one
well.
of the originals with me. Brenda is still with me in the group, and I got two young ladies. In fact, one of the young ladies is the niece of C.P. Spencer, who was with the originals, and the nephew of Leon Ware, who wrote with Marvin Gaye. Same girl, same family, and the other young lady her name is Jackie G. She's from Detroit. She's well known around the city. Very talented young ladies and very energetic.
Wow.
Because I need that.
And are you still as energetic today as you were when you set out?
Well, look, I don't do no splits anymore. So I try to go, I really try to do my Jerry Butler interpretation now. More of the Iceman. And then we learned a lot when we were talking about songs that had a lot of social justice in it. And we learned really how to really be able to deliver those things when we toured we did 90 days with the Jackson 5. And at that time, it was hard for anybody to do that. Because when you're in those sold out crowds, all the kids are saying is, "We want the Jackson 5."
Yeah, of course.
And when I went with Norman and caught them with the Commodores one time, and Norman said, "Well, what you gonna do about that?" I said, "I'm working on that right now." I'm working on that. So when we got with the Jackson 5, we brought a band. And after that tour with the Jackson 5, after we left the Jackson 5 tour, the next year they had a band. I mean, I'm not knocking they had the cousins and things, and they were playing those little rhythm tracks. But after that, they knew the presence of a band, and I had an all-star band with me on that tour. So we lasted all 90 days.
Amazing. What an incredible career you've enjoyed, and still going strong today.
I really have. I mean, I think that it's such a blessing. And right now I'm trying to do some things now to honor some of the folks that were before me, and unsung a lot of the things about them when I tell stories or write about things or do interviews about a lot of folks that people just never got a lot of information about. I first left out of Detroit with Chuck Jackson when I was with the Peps. And we did 10 days at the 20 grand, Chuck Jackson, Yvonne Fair, and the Peps. And we left there. Chuck signed us up to do a tour with him. And we left the 20 grand to go to the Apollo in New York, I'm sorry. And when we got to New York, that was the first major date. We got to New York after we did those 7 days. Chuck fired us.
Oh, no.
Left us in New York.
Wow.
But the guy that owned the Apollo hired us to play a second week. Now, mind you, we were in the Apollo, unknown group. We were coming in with a Chuck Jackson review. We did not have a hit record. And this made the second week in a row that we were working the Apollo. And after the next show that we were on was from the Flamingos. Wow. See,
don't worry.
So many years
Joe,
ago, and I know him very well.
I'm just a little concerned. Oh, right. Joe.
Tommy Hunt. We did the show with Tommy Hunt. That show was so good. And the people at the Apollo say, we're getting a full house for the opening act.
Wow.
People were coming to catch us. We were opening those shows.
Amazing.
So the next show that was coming in behind us was called The Battle of the Groups. And they had a disc jockey there named Frankie Crocker. And he was a good friend of mine. But this show that was coming in there was by Rocky G. So he said, man, those guys, you need to put them on that show too. So we headlined the Battle of the, we opened the show for the Battle of the Groups.
Awesome.
And we walked out of there with the little statuette.
Gorgeous.
Joe. And from then on, we was an Apollo favorite.
Amazing. Joe, if you had to do it all again, would you do it differently? Or would you do it exactly?
I wouldn't change a thing because I thought about it many times. And I can't see how anything that I would change would lead to that next thing that it led to the first time.
I love it.
I wouldn't change a thing.
Joe Harris, I better let you go because Zoom's going to throw us off here also. So I'll let you go back to rehearsal. The only thing I'd say is, could you bring Undisputed Truth to Australia? Come and see us. That would be awesome.
It would be my pleasure.
Thank you so much for talking with me today, Joe Harris. What a joy to meet you.
Thank you. Thank you very much for having me. It's my pleasure.
All the very best. I'll
Sorry
see you
about
again.
the audio at the front.
Not a problem. Not a problem. All the very best
great.
to you. Thanks for your time, Joe.
Okay. Thank you very much.
Bye now.
Bye-bye.